Striking Gold, the Motherlode landscape. Week number 4 of the MLL is coming up this week, but we got a chance to see week number 3, what the teams will do. He's Jeremy Hurtado. I'm Levi Flores. But before we get into the show today, Jeremy, last week, before the show began, we had Danny Scott here. He was our guest. And you had to mention me wearing T-shirts on the show. And you said, hey, I've been wearing a polo. Danny shows up with a polo. And I've been wearing T-shirts, but I do have to say they've been nice T-shirts. They don't have any stains. They look nice on camera, but you still had to make fun of the fact that I wore T-shirts. So I decided to change it up a little bit and not wear a T-shirt, but I had to wear the stripes.
Okay.
So
I can respect that.
Just at any point, I am wearing the stripes, so you have to respect my decision on anything. And yeah, had to throw this out there. Not a T-shirt, but it is the stripes.
It's an improvement. I'll take that. I'll take it.
Okay. Well, we do know that stripes aren't necessarily the best thing in the world, but hopefully we can be on good terms today. So I expect to be called official Levi throughout the show today, too.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay. Awesome. Let's start off week 3 scores and predictions for Amador at Union Mine. You said 35-28 Amador. I said 32-24 Amador. And no points were awarded because Union Mine decided to bring in the slaughterhouse and win 42-17.
Yeah, absolutely. Union Mine came out. It was close in the first quarter. I believe it was 10-7 Amador. And then Union Mine, I believe, ran off 28 straight points and kind of just ran away with it. Amador was able to get a touchdown late, but yeah, I mean, Union Mine came out. They're 3-0. They did what they had to do. Beat Amador. Amador, I don't think, played the best football that they could, so it was one of those things. But hey, Amador's 2-1 now. They look to rebound this week.
And it was Amador's first real test of the season. Their first 2 games, they blew out their opponents, but they also didn't play a game for almost 2 years. So you take that into account, playing this Union Mine team. They did score on their opening drive, so did Union Mine. And Amador's offense, I would agree, held up to a certain point until Union Mine just decided to go on that slaughter. They did have a lot of interceptions thrown too, so it was just part of their gameplay that didn't work out, but the rest of their offense did a fairly decent job there. In those interceptions, 2 scores definitely won the game for Union Mine because they scored every time that they forced that turnover. And there was 21 second quarter points for Union Mine, so that was another killer to it. But like I said, I would agree that Amador's offense did hold up.
Yeah, and it was one of those games that we were broadcasting games. We were kind of paying attention to the scores that came in, and I was like, okay, it's going to be back and forth. And then all of a sudden, it was just Union Mine touchdown, and then Union Mine scored right before the half, got the ball back in the second half, scored again, and we were like, okay, this is over. It's kind of a situation where it got away from Amador. Like I said, it happens, especially Amador wants to throw the football around, you said, and then they threw the picks. So it's one of those things where regroup, come back next week ready to go. It was a 1 loss. It's not really going to, I don't think, be a huge factor come playoff time. So you move on and you just kind of try and get better this week.
And so we get no points for this matchup since we both thought Amador would take a victory. And looking at the scores, I think there were still fair predictions for it, but Union Mine, just their defense, was the factor that won the game for them. Although Danny Scott, who was here last week, not only did he get this game correct, but he got all 5 games correct for the winners. Although when we put it down into our point systems, he may get points for each winner that he chose. But in the games that we were a part of too, he didn't get close enough on any of the scores. So he stuck with 1 point through all those. For our point play, at least, no points here. As we move on to Argonaut Livingston, same thing, no points are awarded, as we both thought Livingston would get a victory just based on their points through the season, having 39 points through their first 2 games. Ended up, the Argonaut Mustangs get their first victory 28-21.
They did it, and Argonaut kind of struggled to begin the first half here again. They were down 21 to 12, I believe, at halftime, and then came roaring back in the second half. Kind of overpowered Livingston a little bit, and hey, great job for Argonaut getting the 28-21 win. They finally might have found some offense, which could help them this week coming into the games, and it's good for a first win for a new head coach too. So, way to respond, way to show that, hey, yeah, we've been having some problems, but we kind of got things put together. and hopefully it corresponds into this week's game.
And for Argonaut, their game heavily relies upon their junior quarterback, Seth Mitchell, who was 8 of 14 in the air for 181 yards, 2 touchdowns, also threw 2 interceptions, but we're going to throw those aside. And then running game, 14 carries for 106 yards and a touchdown as well. So they heavily rely upon that. And it was the first offensive game for Argonaut. We only saw them score 6 points before this. Right. Now they score 28 in the one game.
No, absolutely. And like I said, that's a big victory for them to kind of get off the 0-2, 0-3. Doesn't look as good. 1-2, you feel a lot better about yourself. Mm-hmm. And you came into a game against a neutral site game this week. So it's positive, building. And I, like I said, at the beginning of the season, I thought Argonaut was going to be a little better in their rankings than they have. And hopefully this is kind of a positive turn for the Mustangs.
Now to Calaveras, Ripon Christian, the state runner-up for D5 AA, traveling there. Jeremy, you said 48-6. I also said 48-6, both of us in favor of Ripon Christian. We were very close on the score. We were actually the same amount of points, of course, same score, but same points away than what the actual score was, if that makes sense. 48-6, it was 42-0. Ripon Christian won this game.
Yeah, it was, and it's just more of the same for Calaveras. Not able to score, not able to move the ball a lot. And Ripon Christian, I mean, they're a tough team, obviously. Yeah. I mean, they put 42 points on the board this week. They're averaging close to 45 points for the season now. And it's one of those things where it's just not a good matchup, I don't think, for Calaveras. It is what it is. You kind of got to play the schedule that you have. Yeah. And Calaveras' schedule, we talked about that earlier this year, that it's just – it doesn't help them any to kind of rebuild, but it is what it is. And so Calaveras, unfortunately, tough times over there. Hopefully things can turn up this week as you play another team from the same, street, basically across the street when you take on Ripon.
Yeah, and that was actually one of my questions that I had written down. Calaveras, I say it's a good game to get ready because the tougher opponents you play, but Ripon Christian, they're too good.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's not a good matchup. It's not a good look when you're trying to rebuild. If you were a normal Calaveras team of the past, then yeah, this wouldn't have been as lopsided as it was, and Calaveras probably might have been favored even. But it's just the way things kind of work lately is that Calaveras is having some struggles with the growing pains with a new coach, and Ripon Christian has things rolling.
And Ripon Christian, they're looking to do it again this year, but win the state title this time. And they're looking very strong at that with the opponents that they played to the similar opponents last year as well. So 48-6 with both our scores. We get 1 point apiece for that. First points of the week. Unfortunately, you just couldn't get Amador and Argonaut's matchup. Sonora Hillmar, you get 2 points. I get nothing because I decided to go with the TVL powerhouse of Hillmar, which ended up falling to Sonora 32-9.
Yeah, in this game, Sonora came out and just jumped on Hillmar, and then it was just Sonora doing what Sonora does. Run the football, playing solid defense, holding Hillmar to 3 field goals, 2 of those and later on in the second half. So it was another game we kind of kept our eye on as we were broadcasting games last week. And we were like, okay, Sonora's doing their thing. And I think it kind of shows that loss against Oakdale, although it was a loss, it kind of built some momentum in that game and then came out and handled Ripon easily and now beat another Hillmar team, which is another TVL team. And now they take a step up in actually size-wise and play Buhat Colony this week, so that's going to be an interesting matchup too. But hey, Sonora is number one because they do the Sonora things, and also shout out Coach Craig. Yep. Becomes the winningest coach in Sonora history, so that's great for him and his family and the program. It was just a positive day last week again at Hillmar.
Yeah, Sonora 1 touchdown in the first quarter, held Hillmar to nothing. Then Hillmar kicked a field goal in that second. It was all that second half that Sonora needed. And we were at the game in Waterford, Somerville's game, and we saw that score at the half, 7-3, and I said, we both have a chance at this. This is looking really nice, and both teams definitely have a chance to win it. It didn't end up that way. Sonora definitely just did their thing. And, of course, the team wants to get Coach Craig's numbers up, too.
Of course.
He's been there for so long, 2009 season till now. They know this has been coming. If they won the division title game last year, that would have tied the record at 108 wins. they ended up losing to that on the final play of the game, unfortunately. Right. So now the loss to Oakdale at the beginning of the season, then they were able to put some wins together to get in there now. And you break a record one season, do you really just only break one record?
No. I mean, you kind of add to it every win, right? I mean, that's kind of the way it is now. Now you have the record. Now you got to go, put it out of reach for someone else, the next person that comes along. So, and Coach Craig, like I said, he's been doing this thing there. We shout out to him. He's done a great job there with Sonora. Taking the reins and making it his program. So nothing but love over there at Sonora.
I had 23-20 Hillmar. You had 35-31 Sonora. Not as close of a game we thought, but Sonora does get the victory, so 2 points to you. And the Somerville-Waterford game, we had really similar predictions. I ended up getting it at 48-14. You had 42-12, and the final score was 56-14, in which the Somerville coach is not happy about the points scored by Waterford, both touchdowns. I don't want to say they were lucky plays, but defensive coordinator Coach Elkins said that's our fault, not their plays that they ran. We let these go. One of them was a pass over the middle that the safety brought in early. He thought it was a run play. Play action got him, and it resulted in a touchdown. Other time, they threw into the corner of the end zone right before the half, and there was shared possession. You said in the broadcast, if there's shared possession, it always goes to the offensive player. Well, he wrestled it out in the end and got that touchdown anyway. So both of those scores, Coach Elkins and the coaching staff, not happy about, but they did win the game handily. Yeah,
they did, and they kind of came out and took the opening kickoff to the house 90 yards, and that kind of set the tone. Then they came out aggressive onside kick, got that, went down, scored. Quick 3 and out by Waterford, went and scored again, and then that was kind of the writing on the walls. But 21-0, in the first 4.5, 5 minutes of the game, and that was Waterford was just kind of shell shocked, not being able to respond and answer. They did get a couple touchdowns late in the first half, but by then it was already 42-14. It was pretty much over from there. For my picks wise, I wish we could have just stopped the game there and said, okay, we're done. But instead, Somerville came out and scored a couple more times in the second half. It was good to see Somerville get some other guys in, some of the second string guys, get them some work, because at some point you're gonna need those guys to come up big in the playoffs or in a league game, and so getting those guys live reps against high school opponents is a positive instead of just at practice.
And freshman quarterback Martinez for Waterford, they only have one freshman on the team, and he's the leader. He did get hurt during that game, and I hope he's able to play this Friday because he played really well despite the loss for the team. He had 8 of 19 on pass attempts, 124 yards, and the 2 touchdowns. Waterford only had 70 rushing yards, though.
Yeah, they're not a big rushing team. I mean, that's kind of the way it is. They're going to throw the football around a lot, which they did against Somerville. To mixed results. But again, once you get down 21-0, I mean, everybody knows you're going to throw the football. He took a pounding. Okay, I mean, there was reasons that he went out and he was holding his ribs. And like you said, hopefully he's able to play this week against Delhi and moving forward against LeGrand. I think it's going to be a big game for them in a couple weeks. So hopefully he's able to kind of get those ribs in order and ready to play, because if he's out, it changes the dynamic of their whole offense.
Yeah, their main wide receiver had to take the place of the quarterback position. And
right.
You want that receiver to be a receiver. You want your quarterback to be a quarterback. So it's definitely a devastating hit if he's not able to play. But you have to give him everything that he did, because he was a phenomenal player, and the next few years for Waterford looks very, very promising.
Hey, and you kind of say, well, why are we talking about Waterford so much? Well, because next year they're going to be in the Lode League. Oh, no, they're not. Never mind. They changed that. See, let's cut that out. Yep. Cut that out.
Flag on the play.
Yep.
No, they did change the Mother Lode League quite a bit, though. Waterford was in, I think it was the initial.
I think the first 2, first 2 drafts. And then
first 2, and it changed up so much between them, the TVL, then the SAL. I mean, all the different leagues changed up so much, and now the Mother Lode League has 8 teams for football, only 6 for all the rest of the sports. TVL, I believe, has Modesto Christian for football, but when it comes to basketball, they're obviously way higher. So there's so many different things that come into play there. But Waterford's always going to be in discussion around the MLL teams because they play similar.
They do, and that's why I was thinking about it earlier. They would be a great fit from a Lode League, play-wise, so far as football goes. But they did choose to stay in the Southern League. But regardless, Somerville plays Waterford regularly.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that we look forward to seeing the development of that program and then behind that young quarterback. That's what we were trying to get to before we got sidetracked there.
Austin Hike, 150 rushing yards in that game, not including the 90-yard kickoff return. So he's looking very promising behind the line. And I was doing some stats before this for our game on Friday, and the duo of Austin Hike, Tristan Barajas, pairs up against the glorified quarterback that was Braylon Leveros and Kai Elkins from last year. And that's something to look at as we continue through the season.
No, absolutely. And that's one of those things we talked about at the beginning of the season is who's going to step up, who's going to fill the role that those two left behind. So far, they've been able to do that with the running game that's been a track meet, just built on speed between Barajas and Hike. And like you said, the numbers kind of show what we've seen in the first 3 weeks of the season where they've kind of come in and kind of filled that void. But I think it's been a mixed bag of people too, because you got Cash who's come out and done some things. You said Barajas, Hike, and then you also get Schnabel,
Rogers as well.
And Rogers.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a mixed bag of people, but the two leaders right now so far, and then obviously Leveros runs the football too.
Yeah.
But it's been Hike and Barajas that have kind of driven things, and then everybody else is just kind of the accents.
Yeah, and Colton Cash as well. He's only 30 yards behind Tristan Barajas, but he carries the ball way less. And the game Friday we mentioned, he's kind of just the carrier. He cashes it in, pun intended and not intended there. But they get him close, and then he just makes big plays that gets that yardage up as well. So that Somerville-Waterford game, 56-14 was the final score. I had 48-14, which gets me 2 points. You had 42-12, which gets you 1. So our week 3 totals, Jeremy, you had 4 points. I had 3, so it catches you up by a point. Total for the season, I have 15. You have 14. So neck and neck through the gameplay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. Keep it close. That way we can make it interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my plan. That's why I let them get a couple of games this time.
Yeah, well, we'll see how you do this week because you mentioned something coming in, and I don't think you're prepared enough as I am. But
okay,
we'll see.
I'm going to keep this covered so you can't see them this week.
Hey, we both had them written down the last 2 weeks. 3 weeks, actually. We've had them written down most of the time. Before we enter this week's play for week number 4 of our MLL teams, we want to thank Meeting Rooms On Demand and Sonora Conference Center. Go to meetingroomsondemand.com and you can rent out Sonora Conference Center and the plenty other locations that they have available to you. Las Vegas, Phoenix, I believe. I mean, it's all over the
Fresno,
place.
yeah.
Yeah, so if you need a meeting room on demand or you know somebody that does, meetingroomsondemand.com. See if there's a location near you. And in Sonora specifically, Sonora Conference Center, which is here. Esparto at Amador, week 4 starting us off. I'm familiar with Esparto, and I was wondering why. I kept looking at it. I'm like, I know Esparto. Somebody played Esparto, and they actually met at Somerville in the second round of playoffs last year, in which they lost 31-0. But before that, even, they have another similar opponent in Union Mine, in which they played in the first round last year and won 28-13.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this Esparto team is kind of come in and they're struggling to score points. It's kind of similar to some of the other teams in the Motherwell League. They've only scored 32 points all year. They've given up 130 points, which isn't a very good ratio. That's obvious, right? Amador scored 114 points so far this year, so that kind of tracks with what Esparto's given up. The one thing to look at for Esparto, Antonio Seatrunk Jr., he's their main running back. He's run for almost 300 yards, 298 to be exact, and has 3 touchdowns. He's kind of led the way. Like I said, they only scored 32 points. He's scored 18 of them, so he's been the guy as far as their offense goes, but yeah, it's going to be a tough sledding, I think, against Esparto.
And for Amador, it's their first home game, which means they finally get to reveal the bluegrass.
Absolutely.
And not the music, but the actual blue turf that they installed.
Yeah, and that's going to be, I think it's going to be one of those things everybody in town's going to come to. I think it's going to be a big event. They'll have the ribbon cutting, all that kind of fun stuff. And I think it's going to be a show as far as the Amador Buffaloes go. And it's something they look forward to for a while for the varsity level. And so I think it's going to be a great thing to kind of get this new regime going in a positive direction this year after everything that happened last year.
Esparto losses to Modesto Christian, Lee Grand, and Delta. But when you look at what they did last season, too, it wasn't very impressive in the preseason. Once they got into league, they basically won all of their games, got into the playoffs, defeated Union Mine, lost to Somerville. So just because they are 0-3 entering this game against Amador does not mean that they're out of any equation. They can still put up some numbers and get into some postseason play.
No, absolutely. You look at the LeGrand. LeGrand's a team that's usually in the second, third round, sometimes the semifinals of the playoffs in that division. Delta, the team from Clarksburg, they're usually really good too. So I don't look at the 0-3 as being okay, but it's just the way they've lost. They've kind of not really been in the game so far. So that's where I think the Spartans are going to have a problem against the Buffaloes.
First meeting between these two teams since the record started in 2005, so it's hard to pair up the teams against each other unless you look at similar opponents.
Yeah, and that's because the Sparta, this is only their second year, and I think it's third year actually in the Sac Joaquin section. So they were in the northern section. They came down a couple years ago, and people started moving around. Them, Sutter, Wheatland, all kind of came down together. So it's going to be interesting to see. Again, I don't think it's going to be that close of a game, honestly. I think Amador kind of runs away with it. And let me check my paper here. Yep. Okay. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game for one team and not so much for the other. I got Amador 50, Esparto 8.
Wow. Okay. I actually have it a little bit closer. Amador still winning 31-17. I honestly have no idea how to look at this because Esparto didn't start the season well last year. They did once they got into league. Amador we haven't seen a lot of, and they've put up good numbers against their opponents, but that Union Mine game wasn't what we expected at all. So I don't know what to really believe, and I feel like Esparto can win by 50 points if they wanted to, but Amador could also win by 100. Like, it's just going to be an interesting battle, and who makes the most mistakes probably.
No, like I said, I think it's going to be an interesting setup. Esparto runs a unique offense, not unique to this league because we've seen it at Argonaut. But it's going to be one of those things where I just think Amador has too much firepower for Esparto to control.
And you just mentioned Wheatland moving down into the Sac Joaquin section as well. They are now playing against Argonaut in this week's matchup, and they're playing at Yuba City High, not Wheatland High School. Yeah,
I'm not sure what that's all about. For say, it's a neutral site game, which is going to kind of be interesting. Wheatland comes in. They lost to Nevada Union. That's their only loss this year. Which Nevada Union's a team out of Grass Valley area that's usually really good. So 26-6 against Nevada Union, I kind of went, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. They got 2 wins, obviously, but Argonaut coming off that win last week, it's going to be an interesting matchup, and I think the neutral site could be a bigger thing than maybe one might think, even though Wheatland and Yuba City are only 15, 20 miles apart from each other. But it's just not being on campus. It's in a different school. That could play a part, I think, in this whole thing. And Argonaut usually travels pretty well, so we'll see how that kind of plays out.
All right, and Wheatland, they're more rush than pass, and Argonaut is more pass than rush when you break down the numbers that way. Wheatland, 25 points per game. Argonaut, 11.3, and most of those are just coming from their previous game. Argonaut relies on their quarterback, Seth Mitchell, and Wheatland relies upon Caden Glover, who has 111 rushing yards out of the 160 per game that they run. So they kind of rely on one person apiece, and it's going to be a back-and-forth battle, I think, between those two players. In the rankings, we talk about the Max Prep rankings a lot, and sometimes it's reliable, sometimes it's not, depending on how it looks. But at this point in the season, 3 games in, Max Prep's equation, whatever it is, can kind of break it down and make it somewhat close. We look at Argonaut for the California ranking, 663. It's the team in the state. Wheatland, 669, only 6 teams apart. The section, Argonaut, 100, Wheatland, 101. So only 1 team apart. Then the division, only 1 team apart, 15 and 16. So with that, I think Wheatland barely gets an edge just because of who they've played at 28-20.
See, that's interesting because I have it a very close game too. Except I have it Argonaut 20-18. I just feel like Argonaut's going to find a way to pull it off, and it's going to be a big win for Argonaut if they can get it, get them back to 2-2. Also get that playoff kind of resume builder back on their side. and sets them up nicely to kind of come back in the league and be productive in the league. So, yeah, I got 20-18. Again, it's just one of those things I could see it going the other way around, and then it'd be a 20-18 Wheatland. I just think this one's going to be close all the way throughout, but I gave the nod to the Mother Lode League team this time.
All right. And 20-18, that's kind of an odd score. 18 points for Wheatland. How are they getting those? 3 touchdowns, no extra points?
I think they missed all the extra points. I don't even know if what their kicking situation is. I didn't look that far into it. I just went, 20-18 sounds good. And so that's what we went with. We'll see how that plays out for me.
All right, so another close one in our predictions there. We head into Ripon as Calaveras will travel there. Calaveras 0-3, Ripon 1-2, in which Ripon, we've seen a few, or at least one MLL team play Ripon so far. Ripon, 7-point loss last week to East Union, but they had the win versus Linden, loss versus Sonora. And those 2 games were back-to-back. It was a 49-42 win for Ripon over Linden, and then a 42-0 shutout against Sonora. So 2 very separate games that Ripon has played, now trying to match up against the Calaveras Redhawks.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing here is the East Union game. Okay, East Union, a team out of the VOL that's usually in that, 3-4 rank system in there. I really kind of looked at this game and I thought, okay, well, if Ripon can somehow upset East Union, maybe they just had a bad night against Sonora and things didn't go well and they got jumped right from the onset with the opening kickoff fumble. But then you look at the East Union score and it's like, okay, 28-21, that's close. I can see that, kind of helping out. And again, it's all kind of looking at this and trying to compare this and that. At the end of the day, I just think right now Ripon's probably a better team than Calaveras. That's kind of what it goes off of. So, I mean, that's all I can go off on this pick. I think that Ripon, the Xavier and Xander connection is going to have a big night against Calaveras, and Calaveras is still struggling to find points. So we'll see how that plays out for the Redhawks.
And I think Calaveras, this might be their best game so far, honestly, looking at it. They played Stone Ridge Christian, Carson, and Ripon Christian. Stone Ridge Christian, it was a tighter score, but Stone Ridge also changed their offense, so they were looking at a slightly different gameplay. Carson, big game. Ripon Christian, big game. But I think this could be the best game for Calaveras so far. Ripon has won the last 7 meetings against Calaveras since they've been playing recently, since 2004. Calaveras won the first 5. So they've played 13 total times, or 12 total times, but Calaveras has gotten the edge only 5 times, and that was way back 2004 to 2009. The last score that was recent here was September 12th, 2022, just last year. Ripon won 49-12, in which I almost copied the score and made it 42-14, but Ripon wins.
See, and I got it 35-12, Ripon.
Okay. So another similar one there. I think Ripon they'll get an extra touchdown in there. You said it yourself, Ripon's a better team. And
right now, I think Ripon has an edge. Now, that doesn't mean Friday night Calaveras can't come out and shock people. But, I think Ripon, if you look at it in X's and O's, I think they're a better team at this moment.
Sonora will be back on the road this week, too, going over to play Buhack Colony. Sonora's 2-1, Buhack Colony 0-3, and their last meeting on record is all the way back in 2005 when Sonora won 40-0.
Yeah, Buhack Colony comes in 0-3, and again, we talked about teams struggling. This one's only scored 17 points all year. Okay, conversely, Sonora's only given up 26 points all year. So things looking bleak there for Buhack Colony, even though they're a bigger school. They're in the Outwater area, but the Wildcats, I think they come off that big win against Hillmar, and I just don't see them kind of letting down against Buhack Colony any.
And really, I wrote this down now because it is an issue that we can bring up. But Sonora's next test, if you even want to call it a test, is Somerville, and that's going to be the final game of the season. They didn't do themselves many favors in the preseason besides Oakdale, in my opinion. And so, I mean, Hillmar, you can expect maybe a game, but it didn't end up being that way. So looking at these games, it's just basically easy runs to get them on the field. Yeah, and
Hillmar, Ripon, you thought those were going to be bigger tests for Sonora. Turns out they weren't. And then, like I said, Buhack Colony, I don't think that's going to be like one of those games that they're going to end up losing. And you look down the schedule, once they start league, I mean, league is league, right? You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
They've only lost one league game, so odds are they're probably going to run through league up to the Somerville game. So you're right. It's a scenario where who are they going to get tested again? I don't know. I don't think so. But you still got to beat the teams that are on the schedule every week, and that's where they're at now. Buhack Colony, again, this is a team that when you schedule it a year or two ahead, you're looking, okay, they're a bigger school. It's going to be a test. It just happens to be that this year right now they're not as strong as they've been in the past. Usually Buhack Colony is a team that goes to the playoffs, might win a playoff game, maybe two, and then this year it just happens to be that they're not finding the rhythm that they normally do down in Atwater. So it's one of those things where it's unfortunate for Sonora that they don't get to kind of challenge themselves against the team that they thought when they were scheduling them. But again, it's kind of how it works when you schedule 2 to 3 years ahead of time. You don't know exactly how things are going to play out.
Both teams are heavy running teams, and looking at the Buhack Colony stats, they have a lot of ball carriers, but they don't have one star.
No, it's very spread out, like you said. Everybody's got like 50, 60 yards. I was looking at that today, and I was like, okay, trying to find a read on how I was going to play things here. Like you said, it's. I think they have 8 or 9 different guys on the stat sheet that have carried the ball, but nobody really coming out and just going, oh wow, look at this. So it's going to be an interesting show against Sonora. Now, does that mean it's going to be all one-sided? Not necessarily. I mean, Buhack Colony come out and hey, it's their home game. They got things to prove. They're going to know, hey, everybody's picking Sonora to win.
Yeah.
So you get a chance to come out and be like, hey, we're going to come out and play against a team that nobody expects you to win, and maybe that eases some pressure, and then they come out and play well. We'll have to wait and see on Friday night. And
I have Sonora winning this game 49-0.
Okay, and I have Sonora winning the game 42-6. Okay, so we're all kind of on the same page there. I think Buhack Colony finds some way to get 6 points, and Sonora does Sonora things and pulls the victory out relatively easily, I would say.
All right, so another similar score, and next week's point system is probably going to go all out of whack because of this. Just one little score is going to change this entirely.
Right, yeah, it's going to be 43-7, and it'll be changing things, so you never know.
And we did create, not necessarily a new rule, but an agreement that if somebody is to guess the score exactly correct, we're going to get a few extra points. Maybe 1, maybe 2. We haven't necessarily decided.
I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more times I'm going to get extra bonus points this week.
Yeah, in your dreams, Jeremy, in your dreams. We'll have to decide that before the games start Friday night, just in case, he gets it. We know I will.
No, it's going to be that.
Okay. And this is the game that I know I'm going to get extra points on. I know the ending score. I know it's going to be this.
You've already seen it?
Yeah, I wrote it.
Oh, okay.
I did. I handed it to the officials. Third quarter, 5 minutes, 37 seconds left. They're going to throw a flag.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
Big Valley Christian at Somerville. Somerville's only second home game in 2 of the 3 that they have this season. Big Valley Christian, they played last year, in which Somerville won 42-7. The year before that, they only won 16-13, but it's a very similar team than what they had, and they have a lot more running options.
No, absolutely, and this is a game where Big Valley Christian comes in 1-2, Somerville comes in 2-1. Their only loss this year, Somerville, was at home, so I know that doesn't sit real well with them either. So it's going to be an interesting scenario. Big Valley Christian. The advantage for them, I think, is they've come up here and played at Somerville before, so it's not like it's a brand new environment that they're going to see. They came up here last time; it was kind of drizzly and rainy, and that kind of helped keep things, I think, lower scoring than it might have been. But yeah, I mean, they've been here; they've seen Somerville at home. They know how that's going to play out. They did beat Denair earlier this year, 14-6, and then since then they lost to Waterford 20-14 overtime, and then lost a Rossi from down in the central section, down past Fresno, 48-7 last week. I kind of struggled with this one because I thought, okay, well, Big Valley Christian has had a history of kind of coming up here and playing well, but it's Somerville and they're doing what they're doing. So this one I kind of went back and forth a little bit with, honestly.
And looking at Big Valley Christian, I looked at their stats, their roster. They have 2 quarterbacks, 1 running back, and 1 receiver. That's pretty much their offense. They're all the number one options. 2 quarterbacks is kind of odd, especially when you only have 1 running back, 1 receiver. But those are the only players that you necessarily have to stop. Everyone else is kind of extra. They might get a look here and there. But those are the 4 players that are going to do any damage against Somerville. So as long as Somerville can contain those players, then they're easily going to stop Big Valley Christian from finding anything near the end zone. On top of that, Somerville needs to work on passing. Comfortability and ability in and of itself, because we saw some passing plays against Waterford pretty early on, but they still only passed the ball 6 times. They've been struggling with that, and it's not a connection issue. It's just making it work the best way possible.
Yeah, that's one of those things with having a sophomore quarterback, especially someone that hasn't not grown up playing quarterback their whole life. It's kind of one of those things where you're moving a guy to quarterback because he's your athlete. And they do a good job of using him as an athlete. They run that quarterback power with him. They intentionally roll him out and say, hey, it's a 1-2 me type of reads. And things that we look for to try and ease a sophomore quarterback in. They ran a screenplay last week, which I really liked because that was something we talked about in the broadcast. And so I think they're finding ways to just kind of tailor their offense to what he can do and what he does well. But yeah, I mean, the passing game, that's not a question. Last week I said, hey, the lack of a passing game could be a problem, not now, but in the future, especially in the playoffs. And so you got to keep working on it as the season goes on and have 3 or 4 pass plays that you feel solid about with a game on the line that you can throw and call and say, hey, I need 5 yards. Here's the play that I'm going to run, and then everybody on the same page and know what's going on. And now's the chance where you get to build that confidence in it as you go on in preseason or non-league games and league games. So I think that I wouldn't be shocked to see Somerville kind of open things up a little bit on the passing game this week against Big Valley Christian, and just try and work on that and get some more confidence going. I liked what they did last week with Leveros, and I think they'll kind of build on that again this week.
And now I mentioned that, one, because it needs to be talked about. It's one thing that Somerville, they don't do a lot of things wrong right now, but that is definitely one of them that needs to be worked on. And that can affect the score of the game. Now we look at the game against Waterford. They had 2 fumbles back-to-back, one at the end of the second quarter, one at the beginning of the third quarter, one of which during the broadcast, nobody knew that it was a fumble. All of a sudden, it was just Waterford's ball. It was really odd. So I don't think Somerville's going to give up the ball like they did. Passing game, they're going to work on a little bit, but they're still going to put up 56 points. And Big Valley Christian will find one way to get into the end zone and score 7 points. So 56-7 Somerville.
Okay. See, I got it. I understand that, and I like the big score for Somerville. I have a big score for Somerville, too. But I think Big Valley Christian causes just enough problems to put a couple more points on the board. And I have it 48-16.
Okay, so 2 touchdowns, 2 extra points?
I'm not sure how we get there, but, we'll get there.
Okay.
I don't worry about the logistics. We just figure out the score, okay?
All right, 56-7 Somerville is what I got. You got something that's wrong. Any changes in your power rankings?
Yes. I'm not exactly sure what I did last week, but I mean, Sonora's going to stay at 1. Somerville's going to stay at 2. That's a given. 3 was Amador, I believe, this last week, and I'm going to leave them there. But I'm going to jump Argonaut up to 4 and then Calaveras down to 5.
And why is that?
Well, Argonaut got to win. That's the first thing. True. They've scored some points. And I had Argonaut up higher earlier in the year, and I thought they kind of tumbled. But I think they're trying to work their way back up into that 2-3 slot. And beating Livingston last week. Now, again, Livingston's 0-3, okay? We're not going to make a huge parade out of it. But getting a win's getting a win. It doesn't matter. And I think once they beat Wheatland this week, I think that's going to bode well for them to kind of come back up the rankings.
Yeah, and the score of that game and the score of the Calaveras game can definitely change something in mine. Mine hasn't changed since week 2. Once Amador got that win big, they hopped right up to number 3. Argonaut's still at the bottom. Calaveras is just above them slightly. But the 2 scores of this week's game, whether they win or not, can definitely change those thoughts for me.
No, absolutely, and it's kind of an ever-changing thing every week. Right now, I feel like the top 2 slots are pretty solid.
Yeah.
But then 3, 4, 5 could be moving every week depending on matchups and how things go.
Game of the week. What do you got?
Game of the week. I mean, I think it's Wheatland Argonaut. Really, honestly, I think that's going to be the closest game this week. I think it's going to be the game that could go either way. I really see the other games just kind of being one-sided. And then so I'm going to go Wheatland Argonaut.
I have the same. Wheatland Argonaut. I had 28-20 Wheatland, and you have Argonaut winning. What was your score again?
20-18, yeah.
20-18. So, yeah, it's definitely one of those. And then just looking at those rankings, whether they're right or wrong, they're just way too close to say one of these other teams are going to have a better game.
Absolutely. I guess they're so similar in everything that they got. One's got 2 wins, one got 1. Okay, we'll throw that out. Just play the game, and that's what they get to do Friday night. So, this is a game that I can't wait to see the score of as we're broadcasting. We might have that on the little phone over there, kind of checking to see the score, just to kind of see how things play out for Argonaut.
Any final thoughts before we close out?
Great to see week 4. I mean, we're almost the league, which is the important part of the season. I can't wait. The weather gets a little cooler. It gets darker sooner. So,
yeah.
I mean, those are all positives in my opinion.
We had some sprinkles last week in Waterford, and just a few weeks ago it was 100 degrees Friday night. Had shorts on, and I actually wore pants on Friday. So.
Absolutely.
The temperatures are changing, which also makes the teams play a little harder.
Yeah, love it when it's a little cooler. The offensive linemen, defensive linemen love a little cooler.
Yeah.
Instead of 106 degrees, they're not a big fan of that. And I just feel like it becomes football weather, and everybody kind of feels more into it. I guess everybody buys in. The students are well on their way in the classes. You're going to have homecoming games coming up pretty soon. So those are all things that they're great about high school football.
Well, go to meetingroomsondemand.com if you would like to rent out the Sonora Conference Center or any other meeting room on demand near you. Somerville High will be broadcasted this Friday night against, who are they playing again? Gosh.
Big Valley Christian.
Big Valley Christian. I knew that. I've been researching too much. Big Valley Christian, Somerville on NorCal SportsTV. 56-7 will be the final score, like I said.
Or 48-16, either way.
He's wrong. Anyway, tune in Friday night for Jeremy Hurtado and myself. Will be there at the game, Thorstead Field. And for us today, you've been watching Striking Gold.